Marin Clean Energy. We're a community choice aggregator serving over 470,000 customer accounts in Contra Costa, Solano, and Napa and Marin counties. Almost forgot Marin. I'm the vice chair of the CCPUC. I'm on the board of an organization called Youth Celebrate Diversity, and that's a nonprofit that provides experiential learning opportunities for high school youth to learn about diversity. I'm also the vice chair and affiliate equity officer on the board of the ACLU of Northern California, where I focus on how to further diversity, inclusion, and belonging at the organization. And so I've been doing diversity work since high school. I have an undergraduate degree in women's studies. So I have a both academic and lived experience perspective to bring to you all today. And that is why I was Nose Goes, the moderator for this event today. So first of all, we want to thank Southern California Edison for the technical support for the webinar today, and Kelly Kwong and Al Matthews in particular. And thanks also to the group of organizers on the CCPUC board, including Jamie Ormond, Tara Kaushik, Megan Somoji, Paul Goodman, and Shara Smith. So thank you all. As we all know, this summer has been it's been a turning point. It's been an inflection point in our country. And I want to note that the CCPUC released a statement on Juneteenth, and I want to quote briefly from that statement. So systemic racism has deep roots in our country's history. And as a result, communities of color are underrepresented in both the legal profession generally and our practice area specifically. And as attorneys practicing before the CPUC, we all work to ensure that everyone in California has access to utility services that are necessary to thrive. And we have a responsibility to improve our organization, and more importantly, to work towards our profession, reflecting the diversity of our state. So accordingly, we are actively working to increase the diversity of our membership, and we are offering our members educational opportunities regarding ways to increase representation within their organizations, including recruitment, retention, and diversity and inclusion best practices. And so that is part of why we are offering this MCLE today. I want to note that there are many types of diversity. Obviously, the statement was made on Juneteenth and it referenced racial diversity very specifically, but there's also gender diversity, neurodiversity, people with disabilities, different socioeconomic backgrounds, immigration status, many different types of diversity. So for the purposes of this discussion, we're encompassing diversity in many different ways, not just in racial diversity. So for the format of the discussion, the panelists will have about 15 minutes each, and then we'll have 15 to 20 minutes for audience questions at the end. If you have questions, please write them into the chat box in the Microsoft Teams app. This way we will be able to see the questions, and I will select the questions purely based on my subjective opinion at the time. So if you have a problem with that, you're welcome to email me afterwards. The most important thing is that MCLE certificates will be forwarded to you from the CCPUC after this presentation is done. So you do not have that certificate now, you will get it later this week. And finally, for those of you who've come to other CCPUC events, we always want to note that I don't know if any decision makers are present, but it's likely that some are. So please do not address topics that are active in rate setting or adjudicatory proceedings before the PUC. Quasi-legislative is fine, but please, you verify that instead of us. So right before we get started, I just want to note, if you would like to have your video off, if you're an attendee, that might make it easier for folks to see the presenters, but it's not a requirement, and it's nice to build community while none of us can actually see each other in person. So with that, we'll get started. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce Dean Anna Han, the interim dean at Santa Clara Law School. And Dean Han specializes in areas of Chinese law, corporate law, startup businesses, and technology licensing. She's well published, writing primarily on topics related to the developing legal system of the People's Republic of China, and is the co-author of the casebook Doing Business in China. She frequently serves as an expert on issues relating to corporate governance and Chinese law, and she joined the Santa Clara University School of Law faculty in 1991 after working at a number of large multinational law firms as a partner. So we're really excited to have somebody with such a wide range of experience with us here today. So, Dean Hahn, as someone who's worked in both academic and private sectors, can you give us some background on diversity in the legal field and the numbers that we see entering into law school?
Hi, Shalini. Thank you very much for inviting me here today for this very important topic. And hello to all members of the CCPUC. I've been a lawyer and a law professor for decades, so there has been some changes that I will share with you. I think most of you will be familiar with the numbers, but from a personal perspective, when I attended law school in the late 70s, I benefited from Title IX, which passed in the early 70s. So women were entering into law school at some pace. I wouldn't say record numbers, but I was still probably with people, women, about 25% of the class. Today at Santa Clara Law, our population of women law students have been consistently at the 50% or higher year after year. So 50%, let's just say that, is definitely a good number since we are half of the population. Racial diversity is something a little bit different. It has increased, but in my opinion, not enough. We are ranked very well for Asian and Hispanics. We don't do as well with Black students. And I'll talk a little bit about the efforts we're making on that front. But I will say this, when I graduated, diversity was already a topic of discussion. And I use that word very deliberately. It was discussed. It was not always.
Kelly, maybe we can get
There's feedback.
Yeah, I think there would be.
Does it work now? Can you try it again, Anna?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Am I still on?
Yes.
Okay, let me keep talking about this. I think what was happening in the law firm setting, at least, was people discussed diversity, but they recruited using the same metrics that they always have. So in my case, I'm a woman of color, and I did well. So I got a lot of offers. Having said that, once I was recruited into the law firm, not very much was done to keep me there. I can share with you some kind of what I call indicia of not including me. First of all, there were two other Asian women in the law firm, and the three of us were different in height and looks. But constantly, people would refer to us by different names because they confused us. That's not making an effort to make someone feel like they belong. So to me, the problem is when you use the same metrics over and over, you're going to get the same results. You're not going to get diversity. In the academy, I was much more fortunate. I entered the academy in the 80s, and I was very fortunate in that we made a hire of cluster of women and diverse women. And as a result, we had each other for support. And the situation in the academy, I will say, is better, but not perfect. To give you a sense, I'm the second women dean of Santa Clara. I'm the first person of color at Santa Clara Law. About 30% of the ABA deans are women. And there's a smaller subset of us who are women of color. We meet monthly because we support each other. And of those, I think about 20 some women of color deans attend. So this gives you a sense of the numbers here. Now, for the students, my top priority as dean, when I started a year ago, is to recruit more students of color, and particularly Black students. This started before this summer, and I did this last year. And I'm delighted to say that this coming year, we are going to welcome double the number of students, of Black students that we've had in past years. But having said that, we need to keep going. Recruitment is not enough. The word retention and inclusion is incredibly important. I think without this conscious effort to include the people and make them feel as if they belong, all your recruiting efforts will be for naught. If you are not consciously making the effort to include, then all you're doing is hiring people of diverse background and hoping they'll survive. And it is not going to be particularly successful. I also recognize that I am not Black, I am not gay, and I'm not disabled. So I don't know firsthand what many of these groups are going through, but I can learn and I can ask. So I encourage everyone to do that. Talk to the people you have recruited and ask, What do you need? I think that's a really important question.
Thank you so much. You touched on this a little bit already, Dean Han, but could you tell us how being an Asian American woman shaped your experiences early in your legal career and how those experiences have shaped your current success?
Sure, I'll be happy to. There's a lot there, unfortunately. I'll try to be succinct. So when I first started in practice, I benefited both from what's called the model minority myth, right? So I was viewed as acceptable as a hire and recruited. Having said that, I mentioned the story about being confused with other Asian women in the firm. They didn't take the trouble to know us individually. By the way, there's a modern twist on that confusion. And I think people of color often face this. Only last year, a colleague of mine, an Asian woman professor, was her photo was posted on Facebook. And Facebook sent me a notification that I was tagged. So AI is still having problems identifying us. I think here's what I would say. In terms of my experience, it does depend on the environment. The first law firm I was with confused me, didn't really know who I was, couldn't tell me apart from the other two Asian women in the firm. The second firm I joined was much, much better in the sense that they value what I had to contribute, and they actually empowered me when I was a third-year associate to go open an office in China for them. Now, it did help that it was my idea. I submitted a proposal to the firm to do this, but they trusted me enough to do that. And I think that gave me a lot of incentive, if you will, to really work hard and to make the firm successful because it was tied with my own success. So I think that's, to me, was the key difference. Nurturing people, giving them the opportunity, assume that they are capable. I think that's, to me, important. I want to share one other personal story if we have the time, and that is the fact of being a woman. When I was up for partnership at my firm, I went to my partner to tell them that I was pregnant at the time with my first child. And it was a really amusing thing because they had no idea what to do with me. I was apparently the first woman partner ever to be pregnant. And they still voted me in. And when I asked about maternity leave policy, the firm was actually fairly progressive in the sense that they had a very generous policy for associates, but they didn't have one for partners. So I got the statutory 6 weeks. Now, when I was in Santa Clara, I had my second child before I was tenured. I tend to take risks like that, but biology is what it is. The key here is this. It was a much different environment. As I mentioned, this cluster hiring allowed a group of us, women of diverse backgrounds. We're all about the same age. We're all having kids about the same time. So we felt supported. We didn't feel odd for taking maternity leave. Again, I was one of the first or second one to do so. But it was a very different environment. So what I would draw from this is when you are thinking about diversity and inclusion, you really have to change the metrics that you measure people by. Are you accommodating them for the things that they bring? If you're looking for unique characteristics, do you then erase that by saying, well, we expect you to work all the time, disregarding your need for childcare or elder care, disregarding your disability or other things that in your life that you need accommodation for? And I think that's the key. If you don't do that, you are not going to retain people who could bring so much to your organization. And I just encourage those listening to think about that.
I am really enjoying hearing you speak today, Dion. You had mentioned earlier that you doubled the number of Black students entering Santa Clara Law School. What are the efforts that Santa Clara Law has taken to increase diversity and to support diverse students throughout school and the bar exam?
Okay, well, we are doing, I think, never enough, but we are doing our best. I would say recruiting, I already said this, recruiting and retaining a diverse student body is my top priority. I think when the national demand for racial justice gained momentum this summer, as you mentioned, after the murder of George Floyd, I had a very constructive dialogue with our BALSA students, BALSA leaders, and I took what they wanted to heart. Again, this echoes what I said earlier. You need to talk to the people that are affected if you want to help them. So this is what they asked for, and this is what we've implemented. We have started a faculty mentor a group just for them, and almost all our faculty volunteer for this. We're also starting alumni mentor group for our students. We are also trying to get a mental health counselor at the university level to help Black students, not just law students, but all Black students on campus, because there are special stresses that they face that are different, and we wanted someone to understand that. We are also planning a series of training for our faculty about how to teach about sensitive issues. I personally this week took an inclusive training session on Monday, and that's not going to be the last one. It's my first one, not the last one. And some of I just want to mention one thing. 3 of our faculty members actually took the summer and wrote a casebook, a criminal law casebook, that took in all the input from our BALSA students about what they feel in terms of when cases come up, discussions about race. And I thought that was just an amazing project. And this casebook is, by the way, released in an open source format. So it's free for law students and law professors. So I've been lobbying, I'm now a lobbyist, not a dean, this summer for our students, because as you know, the California bar was delayed. So I've been lobbying the Supreme Court, the California Supreme Court, along with other ABA deans, about a shorter bar, a safer bar, and diploma privilege to help our grads. So that's been very much what I've been active about doing. But I'm going to say this is the beginning, not the end. There's so much more we can all do. And I feel like I am ready to always keep dialoguing and keep improving. So my training, personal training, as well as training for the faculty at Santa Clara, will be ongoing.
Thank you so much. You mentioned your side hustle as a lobbyist here. Many of us, we lobby for our jobs. And I'm very interested. I'm not sure if everybody on the line knows about how the coronavirus pandemic has affected the class of 2020, particularly the students taking the bar exam. So I'd love if you could talk about that a little bit and speak specifically to how it affects diverse graduates.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that, because this graduating class has experienced things that none of us could have even imagined. And I say it's an unprecedented hardship. So first of all, they had to switch to online learning mid-semester. I think there's a lot of positive things to be said about online learning, but it's very difficult and quite a challenge when we switch mid-semester, everybody having to shift that mode. Also, this class missed graduation, which is really heartbreaking for me and many of them, because we have so many students who are first-gen students. For them, it's the first person in their family to graduate from college, let alone receive a law degree. So it's kind of a multi-generational, family-wide heartbreak not to be there to celebrate. So I found that really hard. And I did promise this class that when, not if, the situation allows, we are going to duplicate that event. We are going to have commencement in person for them. So I think it's been hard. We have dealt with the postponement of the bar. We've tried to support our students. We're going to open up our law school, even though right now the county health directives doesn't really let us do that. When it comes time for the October bar for our students to come and be able to take it if they have bandwidth problems and things. I will say this, the way it impacts students, and in this case, the diversity I'm talking about is more economic diversity as opposed to strictly by race or gender. It's much more impactful on students who can't afford to wait for the bar to happen. And this 3 months delay, it's actually 4 months, is really, really hard on them. And I think it's also doubly hard, and I'm sure those of you who took the bar know this, not everyone passes on the first try. And to have the bar in October means the grading doesn't get done till January, and not in time for people who fail to take the February and sign up for the February bar. So all this is just devastating for them. But I will end with what I call positive information. One of our alumna at Google voluntarily on her own started a Google form. It's not an advertising for them, but she started a form and asked our alumni to help mentor this class. And we had 130 attorneys sign up to mentor our students. I'm really hoping to convert that group to mentors for our existing third year class also, because they need it too. They're going to face very similar situations when they graduate, hopefully not with the bar, but certainly with online learning and things. So that's something that I'm working on right now.
Thank you so much. It's been really enlightening to me to see how far law schools have come since I graduated from law school, or maybe it's just Santa Clara. That's fair too. But I'll look forward to hearing more from you during the Q&A portion. So thank you so much, Dean Hahn.
My pleasure.
All right, we'll move on to Mark Toney. I feel like Mark doesn't need an introduction. I'd be surprised if the 140 people on this line don't know him, but I will do one anyways. So obviously, Mark is the executive director of the Utility Reform Network, and he aligns legal, organizing, legislative, and communication staff to fight for affordable, clean, and safe energy and phone service for all California residents, with a special focus on low-income households, communities of color, immigrants, and rural communities. So Mark currently serves on a number of boards. He serves with me on the ACLU of Northern California board. He's also on the board of the Consumer Federation of California, the National Whistleblower Center, and the California Shakespeare Theater. Where do you find the time, Mark? And lastly, Mark has also served as the executive director for the Center for Third World Organizing and also for Direct Action for Rights and Equality. And he holds a BA from Brown. And I don't think many people know that you have a PhD in sociology from Berkeley. So we'll get a little bit into that in this first question. So Proposition 209 was an initiative passed by the voters of California in 1996, and it amended the state constitution to prohibit state and government institutions from considering race and gender in admissions and employment. And so although it's couched in non-discrimination terms, Prop 209 ended affirmative action in the state. And as a Berkeley Law graduate, I can personally attest to its effect in preventing a generation of Californians of color from accessing higher education. We had 2 African-American men in my graduating class at Berkeley Law. And, you know, we all talked about it. We all knew it was because of Prop 209. So I'm proud to be part of the California Community Choice Association's decision to support ACA 5, which is a bill authored by Dr. Shirley Weber, to allow the voters to reconsider Prop 209 this fall. And that will be on the ballot this November as Proposition 16. So Mark, how did the repeal of affirmative action and the dearth of students of color resulting from Prop 209 impact your experience as a doctoral student in the sociology department at Cal?
Thank you, Shalini. I observed that the biggest difference between how white undergrads and Black undergrads get treated is that when they mess up, white students get support and Black students get screwed. So let me tell you a story about when I was a graduate student instructor. A student came to my class one day and said that her friend Vicky wasn't going to be on class today because she was in jail for violating probation because the used car she had just bought was reported stolen in another state. Now, Vicky's original conviction was for welfare fraud because she failed to properly report her Pell student grant to her TANF worker. Now, when I went and told the white male department chair what had happened, he threw up his hands in defeat. Now, I'll be goddamned if I'm gonna let a single Black mom miss Christmas with her 4 boys while sitting in jail over racist bullshit charges. So I made my department chair write a letter attesting to Vicky's good character. I got a similar letter from the principal of Oakland High, where Vicky served as PTA president, and from myself as her instructor, and I submitted them to the judge in advance of her probation hearing. Now, Vicky did make it out for Christmas. With her boys, she was able to return and finish the class. No thanks to the sociology department, who had really given her up for life. So I intervened one more time for Vicky when I got a call from a white male grad instructor who was about to flunk her from his class because of suspected plagiarism. Seems the department chair recommended that Sean give me a call. So apparently the final paper that she had submitted had turned up on one of those searches for plagiarism. So I appealed to Sean's sense of fairness by pointing out that single moms with kids sometimes need to take shortcuts just to get by in life. No dice. He wasn't buying it. So then I shared my own story about how an African American studies professor, George Houston Bass, who was the literary executor to the Langston Hughes estate, had cut me a break as an undergraduate, passing me for a course when I had not completed the work because I was too busy being a campus political leader. So I asked Sean to consider whether the world was a worse place or a better place because someone had cut me a break that kept me from being expelled so I could finish my bachelor's and be in this doctoral program. I asked him to consider whether the world would be a worse place or a better place if Vicky was able to graduate with a degree from UC Berkeley. Yeah, I convinced him to cut Vicky a break. The bottom line is that white students had champions all over the place when they needed to be rescued. Most of them had parents who had gone to college. They had white professors and grad students galore who were invested in their success. What I learned is that if you want Black students and Black employees to be successful, somebody's got to step up and be their champion.
Thanks, Mark. I feel like I'm a bobblehead over here because I'm nodding so furiously at what you're saying. So anyone who has seen you testify in Sacramento knows the passion and personal experience you bring to your role. And how has your identity shaped your career path and led you to Turn?
So I often introduce myself as an organizer by trade, a sociologist by discipline, and a movement leader at heart. Those are the three key elements to my identity. I'm an Army brat, born in Barstow, moved to Monterey, where my brother was born, went to kindergarten in Vallejo, first grade in Louisiana, second grade in Kansas, third, fourth, and fifth in Illinois. I went to sixth grade in Vallejo, and then my parents bought a home in American Canyon, so I went to Napa 7 through 12. I was an activist in high school and in college. I am a movement leader with 24 years of experience as an executive director for 3 organizations, the Direct Action for Rights and Equality, Center for Third World Organizing, and the past 12 years, as most of you know, at Turn. So the way I got to Turn is the attorneys who were there at the time had shared at a board retreat that they were frustrated that decisions at the CPUC were being made less and less on the merits and more on political considerations like free market ideology or the politics of deregulation. And the attorneys were having a hard time. How do you fight free market ideology within the narrow confines of a rate-making proceeding? And the answer is you can't, there's no room. So that the board decided to search for a leader that had experience mobilizing grassroots communities, building broad, diverse coalitions, and leading public policy campaigns. And so that's how they ended up with an organizer instead of an attorney as executive director. My main job at Turn has been the transformation of a public interest law firm into a social movement organization. I still have a lot of work to do. We've made some progress, and diversifying the staff and board has been key. So my identity as an organizer developed in middle school. I was born in 1960, a fan of the race to space, and by 6th grade, I had decided to become an astrophysicist. But in the 8th grade, I read The End of Affluence by Paul Ehrlich, and it convinced me to become a political activist and organizer. My identity as a sociologist is rooted in a public debate I had with the director of the Rhode Island Department of Human Services, where he said the governor's welfare reform package is designed to reduce the rate of recidivism among chronic welfare recipients through behavior modification. That hit me like a ton of bricks. I realized that the terms of debate were being defined way before they hit the grassroots, and that's what led me to become a sociologist. My identity as a movement leader for racial justice is influenced by Gary Delgado, who himself was a sociologist, a welfare rights movement organizer, a race scholar, and founder of Center for Third World Organizing.
Thank you. So this is a very loaded question, and I'm glad I get to ask you, Mark. So how does the Black Lives Matter movement intersect with your advocacy at Turn and the CPUC's regulatory work? And I think you'd like to highlight, and I would like you to highlight, especially the work around disconnections.
So initially, I was very reluctant to publish a statement on Black Lives Matter because I was so sick and tired of the grandstanding that I saw in so many statements. I ended up focusing a statement that we did publish on how much work Turn needs to do to fight racism, both internally and externally. The Turn board approved meeting the challenge issued by Black Lives Matter by agreeing to prioritize the inclusion, hiring, and supporting of Black attorneys on Turn staff, to partner to increase the pool pipeline of Black attorneys. And we view this as a sectoral problem, so we want to partner with groups like Greenlining, CCPUC, the CPUC itself, CalPA, and other entities that share this interest. We are securing resources to do staff training on dismantling racism, because we have a lot of work to do at Turn. We're also securing trainings for race-based policy issue analysis. Turn is very good at economic analysis. We have a long way to go to bring up our race equity lens to be at the same level as our economic. And we've agreed to adopt Juneteenth as an official Turn holiday starting next year. So we have brought in, even before this, a race analysis in looking at disconnections when we put out our report on the impact of disconnections on the health of communities. It's on our website if you want a copy. We got zip code level data so that we could map out the distribution of the disconnections, but we also were able to show in each zip code what the racial composition was in such a way that we could make claims about and document how Black and Latino communities in particular, and also in certain zip codes, Native American communities were being disproportionately impacted. Now, I want to highlight a couple of the challenges issued by the Black Lives Matter movement. One is, I don't value equity as a goal because I refuse to let people justify bad behavior by saying, well, I treat everybody that way. I want behavior that shows respect to everybody. I don't want to put up with an equal opportunity asshole. And since I understand we have a few attorneys in the audience, let me pick a bone. It pisses me off every time I hear the term grandfathering, because the grandfather clause is a racially offensive term, because in the late 1800s, the grandfather clause was used to disenfranchise Black voters in the South after Reconstruction by saying that one of the eligibility to vote was that your grandfather could vote. I will also say that rule of thumb is an equally offensive term because it refers to the Old English common law rule that said a man could beat his wife with a stick no thicker than his thumb. So I really encourage people to consider not using these two terms. My last point is every organization needs to do its part to promote racial justice internally and externally. Turn does not get a pass because it has a Black executive director. Racism is embedded and will remain embedded in any organization that fails to engage in a deliberate process to identify it and root it out.
Thanks, Mark. I think that's so true. It's that even with the most work, there's always more work to be done. And with the best of intentions, people don't know they're using racist, sexist, coded language. I think we saw that earlier last year when the commission released its white paper on customer choice. It was called the Green Book. Obviously, some steps were made to repair that, but there's just a lot of ignorance. And I think the only way we can all move forward is to acknowledge our ignorance, no matter how educated we think we are, and to move forward and humbly learn more. So thank you so much, Mark. We'll come back to Mark for the Q&A portion. Right now, we'll move on to Al Matthews, who's a senior attorney with Southern California Edison. So over the past decade, Al has represented SCE in several key administrative proceedings at the PUC, including its general rate case, its nuclear decommissioning costs, triennial proceeding, and numerous other cost recovery, reasonableness review, and rate design proceedings. And Al has also served as SCE's lead in-house attorney for regulatory proceedings involving songs. What's really, I got to know more about Al through doing this bio. He's very involved in the legal community, which I did know because he's an officer on the board of the CCPUC this year. And he also serves as an adjunct professor for business law at El Camino Community College. And for over a decade, Al has volunteered as a mock trial coach for the Monterey Highlands Elementary School in connection with the Constitutional Rights Foundation, an annual mock trial competition. Al graduated law school from Georgetown. He's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. And I think the most fun tidbit about Al is that he served as a nuclear submarine officer. So thank you so much, Al, for joining us today. I want to talk to you about this we're both in-house counsel, so we both hire external counsel as the occasion rises. In January 2019, through my engagement in the Women's General Counsel Network, I ended up signing on to a letter with over 170 general counsels demanding more diversity from private law firms. And Al, since you're heavily involved in the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity, I was wondering if you could describe that organization and how it creates a pipeline for diverse attorneys.
Sure. The Leadership Council on Legal Diversity was an organization that was created in 2011. It's made up of more than 320 corporate general counsels, chief legal officers, and law firm managing partners whose stated joint mission is working to build a more open and diverse legal profession. LCLD, that's what it's known for in short. Their programs are designed to attract, inspire, and nurture talented students and attorneys in the legal community, thereby helping to make a new and more diverse generation of attorneys and to help them ascend to positions of leadership within their respective companies and firms. I'll say that LCLD is looking at more than just increasing diversity within the legal profession. They are looking to create diversity within the profession at leadership levels. LCLD, they seek to do this at all levels of the legal pipeline. In fact, there are 5 official programs. These include a first-year law student scholar and mentoring program that identifies diverse first-year law students to pair them up with attorneys from LCLD member organizations. There is also a Pathfinder program for junior attorneys at the beginning of their careers. And there is a fellows program for more senior attorneys, senior associates, and junior partners seeking to take the next step into leadership roles within their respective organizations. And then finally, there's a self-run alumni program for those who have participated in the fellows program. The alumni program seeks to build on the leadership development and professional networking of the fellows program once a fellow has completed their year. I'll speak briefly regarding the fellows program, which I participated during 2013 and 14. The fellows program is a year-long program. It's designed to enhance the fellows' leadership and management skills, as well as build on their professional network. Program activities include completing a self-assessment of leadership strengths and weaknesses, participating in leadership seminars. We meet 3 times a year at the beginning of the fellows year, in the middle, and at the very end. And there are also learning experiences and lunches. It's a national program, so you might have a fellow that's in which a Florida law firm that will travel across the country, to Los Angeles, to Southern California, Edison, for one of these leadership events. During the seminars and learning experiences and lunches, the host organization for that event, let's say SCE, will cover critical topics affecting their particular industry, and then the role and responsibilities of the General Counsel. And at all points in the program, fellows will interact with key legal and business officers of the participating corporations and firms. As I was, thinking about this issue and preparing for this panel, the diversity and elimination of bias challenge that we face, I think it really lies in how truly not diverse our profession is. I took the opportunity to look at some statistics. The U.S. population is 77% white, 18% Hispanic, 13% Black, and 6% Asian. Okay, and hopefully folks, can remember those numbers. The U.S. legal profession, in contrast, is 81% white, 5.6% Hispanic, 4.4% Black, and 4.7% Asian. Okay, so all of those groups that I just mentioned, the white percentage went up relative to their percentage of the U.S. population. All those other groups, their percentages went substantially down. Okay, I mentioned those numbers just to say that LCLD is one organization that is seeking to address this challenge. As a past participant in the Fellows Program, I would say that the value of the Leadership Council is twofold. First, I think it helps participants identify what their strengths and relative weaknesses are as a leader, so that they can focus on areas of improvement and emphasize their strengths in creating a leadership brand that helps them to obtain promotion. And second, and I think this is crucially important for attorneys with firms, it is invaluable in creating and building professional networks, which I think can be a real challenge for attorneys of diverse backgrounds who do not necessarily have access to that large network. I want to conclude by noting that it's a significant commitment that the participating firms and companies annually make to LCLD. This includes both in terms of money, there's travel expenses and things of that nature, but also the amount of time that they allow their participating attorneys to participate in taking time away from work. I know I covered a lot there. for further information for folks who want more information about LCLD, they can go to lcldnet.org. And there's all sorts of facts and figures and information about that program.
Thanks, Al. I'm going to take it a little bit more personal because the personal is political. In 2014, I spent a lot of time opposing a bill, which I'm sure many folks might know about, AB 2145. And I went to an event where I ran into a senior legislator in whose committee the bill would soon appear. So I think many of us have been in the situation where you see the person that you need to talk to across the room and you kind of, scroll your way around and try to get to them. So I ended up being able to talk to this legislator for about 5 minutes on the bill. And at that point, I was the lead attorney in the state working on it. And after my, what I hope was eloquent speech about the bill, he looked at me and he said, "Oh, what college do you go to?" And it was really clear that my appearance had made him discount all of my advocacy before I'd even opened my mouth. And so I'm wondering, Al, do you have any similar experiences where someone's perception of your appearance shaped your advocacy to your detriment?
Yeah, that's it's an interesting question, and many of us have anecdotes, of that nature. I pondered the question deeply, and I think it can be answered on many different levels. The short answer is yes. I think my appearance has affected my advocacy to my detriment on some occasions. At least in part, at least in the initial part of my advocacy or advice and counsel that I'm providing. I do want to say that I think for the most part, judges in court, fellow attorneys will make fewer prejudgments based on appearances. I'm pretty confident in saying that about about my colleagues. I think they're more inclined to let the attorney speak, to allow the attorney to show what they know and how they communicate before making a judgment. I think it helps in our profession that we've made efforts and strides in seeking to address explicit and implicit bias. The bigger challenge, in my view, however, is with folks outside of the profession, but who deal with counsel. So when I've worked with engineers, finance professionals, other non-attorneys, I have gotten that question. What college did you attend many times? Now, sometimes I know it's just small talk and folks trying to get to know someone. At other times, to be candid, I do perceive it as coming from a place of bias, as though the answer I give is necessary for me to establish legitimacy, and that the same question would not be asked of others. I don't know if that's a fair perception of mine, to have, but it is a perception that I have from time to time when I get that question. But I do want to emphasize that I've generally have only perceived this from folks outside of the profession, not from my fellow attorneys. Perhaps more worrisome is the individual who doesn't even ask the question. I assume if folks who have asked it are asking it to confirm my legitimacy, that there are others who haven't asked that question and then come to their own conclusion just solely based on appearances. I'll share with you it's kind of a personal, thing about me. To be candid here, one of the reasons why I wear a tie, and I wear a tie daily at work, back when we were going to work, and folks would ask me, "Why do you wear a tie?" And I say, "Well, frankly, I wear a tie to combat the prejudgments that sometimes are made." I'll end by saying that the other way I was thinking about your question was in regard to how an individual's college and law school choices, where they went to school, impacts the legal profession pipeline, with national law firms and corporations generally hiring from national law schools or looking for that on someone's resume. and how that can affect an individual's path down the road. It certainly doesn't mean that someone that isn't coming from a national law school can't be successful in their career, but I would say that I've observed that that choice does seem to have a bigger, more lasting negative effect with minorities than it does to non-minorities. That's more observational. I don't have any stats and figures to bear that out. So I think it's something that we need to address in our profession, and we need to think about reasons why diverse individuals may not be attending law schools. It could be financial related. It could be there could be many reasons why they're qualified to go to those law schools, qualified to be hired by a firm or a company, but don't necessarily have that law school background. I think it's something that we need to consider in our profession.
That's so interesting that you said that, Al. Obviously, yesterday we were all, we all found out that Joe Biden's picked Kamala Harris for his running mate. And I immediately saw an article that said Kamala Harris is the first person since 1984 who has not gone to an Ivy League who's on the Democratic ticket. And, Howard and Hastings are pretty damn good schools. And so it was really interesting to me that immediately someone looked at her educational background. I don't know where Joe Biden went to college. Is Joe Biden a lawyer? I don't even know. So I thought it's really interesting that you noted that, because where people of color are often viewed in that prism, right, of what is your educational background and how do you prove yourself in this world, in this privileged educational arena. So the last question for you, Al, is how do you believe this session today is really sort of about the arc of somebody's career, from law school to law firm to nonprofit, in-house counsel. We're really trying to point out ways throughout somebody's career that they can increase diversity. How do you believe that increased diversity would affect regulations and the regulatory practice of our state if it was embedded in all of these institutions we've talked about today?
Yeah. I would look to statistics that demonstrate the benefits of diversity. As I was preparing, I did a little bit of research, and I found some figures, and which I'm going to provide here. The first is that organizations with diverse management teams outperform industry average by 35%. Okay. The second here is that inclusive teams make better business decisions than individuals 87% of the time, with homogeneous teams making better decisions than an individual 58% of the time. So there's a 30% increase in making a better business decisions when the team making that decision is a diverse team than when it's a non-diverse team. Okay, and then again, 35% increase over industry average when the organization is diverse. And then finally, for every 10% in diversity on senior executive teams, companies' earnings rise 0.8%. So there's a correlation between greater diversity, greater earnings. Now, based on these numbers, and if you believe them, and I do believe them, I think increasing diversity throughout the sectors that we've been talking about will make each participating stakeholders stronger and better advocates overall. I think it will make SCE better advocates on behalf of SCE, TURN better advocates on behalf of TURN. And then to the extent that I think each advocate is better, I think it's reasonable to expect that there will be improved regulatory outcomes, that there'll be an improved regulatory process, and from that, an improved regulatory decisions. That doesn't necessarily mean that SCE is going to get its position all the time, or TURN is going to get its position all the time. But I think to the extent that both organizations and others are better organizations because of the diversity, I think we can reasonably expect that we're going to get a better process and better outcomes. I also think that increasing diversity across sectors will make sure that a diversity of interests are truly being represented at the CPUC. Different issues may come to light, changing the direction and focus of the Commission's regulatory policies. Issues that may not have received much attention in the past may stand to come to the forefront as diversity in our profession increases. Again, I think the more varied and diverse points of view are, while frankly, it may at times frustrate those of us who practice at the CPUC to have to address them. But at the end of the day, I think we will probably get an overall better regulatory result than we would if those varied and diverse points of views were not being represented.
Thanks, Al. You're the consummate regulatory attorney, because I sort of asked you this qualitative question and you came back with quantitative data. You're very reflective of our practice. So thanks, Al. We'll hear more from Al during the Q&A. Now we'll turn to Vid Prabhakaran. He's a partner and the chair of the energy practice at Davis Wright Tremaine. Vid regularly advocates on behalf of clients throughout the energy sector who envision an efficient and reliable energy marketplace and seek to successfully invest in the reduction of greenhouse gases. Vid has over a decade of experience directing client successes before California regulatory bodies, including our acronym SOUP, CPUC, CEC, CARB, CAISO, as well as the legislature. And he also represents clients in regulated transportation, telecom, and water sectors. And just a short sampling of Vid's clients to get a breath of where he's coming from is the South San Joaquin Irrigation District, the city of Long Beach, Tesla, Uber, the California Community Choice Association, PowerX, Bear Valley Electric Service, and the Morongo Band of Mission Indians. Thanks so much, Vid, for joining us today. So Vid, you and I have known each other a long time. You and I sat on the South Asian Bar Association of Northern California together for a few years, and you've been heavily involved with the South Asian Bar, both locally and nationally, and as well as the Minority Bar Coalition. So how do you feel that organizations like this contribute to diversity in the legal field, and would you encourage our membership to join similar bar associations, keeping in mind they're already members of the CCPUC?
Yeah, look, I would obviously encourage not just our diverse members, right, but all of our members to be active members in diverse bar associations. And I encourage folks, especially our non-diverse members, to sort of sit in the shoes of our diverse members for a moment. You often expect that we will participate with CCPUC. You expect that we participate in other industry bar associations, but you also expect that we will participate in some of these diverse bar associations because you recognize the networks that they provide. And oftentimes our non-diverse members are not expected to also participate in additional bar associations. So, one thing to reflect on is that we encourage you to come join us in these diverse bar associations, and please don't feel like it's not a burden that you can share in. It's something that you too can join. So, your primary question though is, look, how do these organizations contribute? So let me talk on that a little bit. First and foremost, they help with the retention of diverse lawyers, right? So diverse lawyers have often left the profession because they don't feel sufficiently connected to their non-diverse colleagues in their own workplace, whether in the sort of mentor-mentee relationship, they don't see enough successful folks with similar backgrounds as them in their workplaces, or frankly, they just don't have friends who have similar backgrounds as them in their workplace. And they often leave because of the microaggressions that they endure on a daily basis that simply pile up to a breaking point. You heard Dean Hahn talk about how she, to this day, she has a visceral reaction about folks confusing her with other Asian women lawyers, right? I don't think I know a single diverse lawyer who doesn't have that happen to them weekly, right? So there are a ton of others, and the list often staggers people when I walk through them. But just by connecting lawyers with mentors and friends, and by offering a safe space to vent about those microaggressions, diverse bar associations ensure diversity in the profession by encouraging the retention of diverse members who might otherwise contemplate leaving the profession altogether. So that's sort of the first that I can think of. Secondly, diverse bar associations also provide attorneys with some initial recognition that attracts the attention of other bar associations and organizations that might otherwise overlook some of the accomplishments of those diverse attorneys who might not be on their radar screen. This is something you'll often see. You'll often wonder, why are those minority bar associations, offering awards for stuff that other bar associations and entities are already recognizing? The whole point is that those little initial recognitions drive additional recognition. And so that is a very important role that these diverse bar associations can play. And finally, minority bar associations are an amazing network for outside counsel and in-house counsel to connect. My own relationship with you, Shalini, is a great example of that, right? I mean, we bonded through Saba. You helped convince, Beth Kelly to give me a shot as outside counsel. My first opportunity to represent a CCA. And I think I've served MC well in that role, but I hope you, Beth, and others at MCE felt rewarded for your decision. But having that first opportunity to represent MCE has opened up numerous opportunities for me and my firm to represent other CCAs. And not surprisingly, the first question that almost every CCA general counsel that I meet with asks is, have you worked for a CCA before? And the strong relationship that DWT has with the CCA community, and frankly, vice versa, is largely a function of the networking that was afforded initially at a minority bar association. So I think that sort of gives folks a flavor for why I think they're really helpful and useful.
It's so funny, we've never actually talked about this, so it's funny to get this in real time with 160 other folks listening in. So Vid, you're someone who's the former chair of the CCPUC. You've been practicing before the commission for over 15 years. You're a partner in a prominent law firm. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're a highly visible person in our field. And so I know you've endured racism throughout your career. And how do you feel that your identity has affected your visibility and advocacy on behalf of your clients?
I mean, it's an important question. And there's good and there's bad. The very fact that there aren't too many South Asian Americans in this field, especially when, I first started, actually enhanced my visibility, right? I literally was often the only dark-skinned person in a CPUC hearing room who was regularly advocating before an ALJ. And so I think that made me memorable for anybody who might have been participating in that hearing room, right? And that was helpful. But it also put me and my advocacy under a microscope. It's hard to make a mistake. You heard Mark talk about that earlier. It's hard to make a mistake because you wonder if you'll be given the same latitude to make mistakes as everyone else. The additional trouble here and the struggle here is, you don't want to be overly sensitive, right? I mean, you heard Al sort of talk about this a little bit too. You're not sure whether it's sort of just your own perception or not. So it sort of adds to that challenge. But, to be clear, though, I'm very confident this isn't just in my head. You do have to prepare harder, and frankly, you just have to deal with the additional microscope aspect of this. But, look, I have watched as non-diverse advocates make the exact same mistake that I made in the same room before the same ALJ and not even have to correct their mistake, while that ALJ turned around and formally dressed me down for the mistake that I made and, made me correct that mistake by dotting every damn I and crossing every T. And you can imagine that was a little frustrating. It's particularly frustrating, right, at the CPC, since we don't formally utilize the rules of evidence. And, we generally let advocates get away with things that a formal court of law would never allow. But, look, I've found that I've had to ensure.
Vid, are you still there? I feel like we might have dropped him. Al, can you hear Vid?
But
No.
yeah, he froze.
Yeah, he
Okay.
froze.
All right.
Okay.
Let me restart and jump back in.
Okay. Well, I will talk a little bit about hiring practices because I was going to set up Vid for the next question, but Vid already knows about our hiring practices. So due to our position as a local government agency, MCE does not take race or gender or other identity factors into account when we hire. So that makes it hard to increase diversity in a purposeful way. However, we do make an extra effort in posting our jobs to reach a wider audience. So, sort of our first step is to post jobs on LinkedIn and our own website. Sort of the next cut is that I really want to highlight diverse professional associations. There's the American Association of Blacks in Energy, the Association of Latino Professionals for America, the National Black MBA Association, and we email the American Indian Chamber of Commerce as well. Second, given that MCE is community-based, we also partner with job development programs in our communities and post to our city and county job websites. Thirdly, we also post to our education partners, such as the Berkeley Energy and Resource Collaborative. Lastly, when we review our resumes, we actually do a blind resume screen. So we only see initials, we don't see names. There's data that shows that if you have an ethnic sounding name, you're less likely to get an interview. Maybe that's why I had to apply to 85 jobs before I got my first job in the legal field. So Vid, now that you're back, is there anything you want to wrap up from your earlier question before I ask you another question about hiring practices?
Sure, and I apologize. Not sure what happened there. I actually could hear you guys just fine and see you just fine, but apparently you couldn't hear me. So I just tried to jump back out. I apologize. I don't know where I was in my sort of rant, so I don't know what the last thing you heard from me was. Shalini, Al, could you tell me what the last thing you heard me say?
I think you were talking about the Brown tax.
About dotting every I and crossing every T.
Yes.
when I was before my ALJ. Yeah. The good news about all of that is that it forces me to be a better lawyer, and ultimately I think I'm a better advocate because of it. But what I want to make clear to everyone is it can be extremely frustrating when the rules don't seem to be applied evenly, even at the CPC, right, where rules of evidence don't apply and you don't have the same sort of requirements that you can get away with at in a court of law. The one additional point I wanted to make was, and this is something that Al spoke to, and Shalini spoke to. I often have to rely on external indicia of my competence to convince a client to hire me. So Al and Shalini both mentioned similar experiences, when they spoke about, having to tell somebody where they went to school or something along that nature. And Al, you are not alone in dressing up a bit more than your colleagues just to ensure that someone doesn't start with an unfairly biased opinion. My colleagues at Davis Wright often comment on the fact that I'm just seemingly dressed up. There's a reason. Look, I know that everyone has to prove themselves to some degree in order to convince a client to hire them. I'm not sure though if everyone has a sense of what a minority attorney often has to do to get hired. I'm really thankful for my clients, and this is not true for every client, obviously, right? But too often, I don't need to just convince a potential client that I have relevant experience or sound like I know my way around the CPUC, right? I often get prompted to deliver my entire sort of non-experience focused resume, where I went to school, what awards I've won, positions that I've held in organizations like CCPUC, et cetera, all to sort of corroborate my competence, which makes it feel like the bar is just a little bit higher for me than maybe someone else who likely would have gotten hired, but doesn't need to have that same resume that I am actually very blessed to have. So, hope that gives some folks a sense of how my identity has, affected my career.
Thanks, Vid. Unsurprisingly, we're running a little bit late. So I outlined a couple steps that government agencies can take to increase their own recruitment and retention of diverse lawyers. Can you give us a sort of truncated bullet point list of recommendations you have?
Yeah, I'll keep to like 2 or 3. I got a bunch, but and just cut me off, Shalini, when you need to. So first thing is just measure everything and probe beyond the basic number of how many diverse lawyers are at your firm or in leadership or whatever else can be provided by just taking a snapshot in time. You got to go past the snapshot. You got to go past the snapshot. You got to look at things like rates over time. So look at retention rates, look at turnover rates for your minority lawyers, and see how that is compared to your non-diverse lawyers, right? And you got to look at that over time. Second is to actually have a D&I budget. Too many companies and law firms say they're promoting diversity, but don't actually have any sort of D&I budget whatsoever. And recognize that you might actually have to invest more in your diverse lawyers, but that the benefits to the organization from doing so will more than outweigh the investments. So that would sort of be my second takeaway. And then the third is to make D&I retention and investment an actual compensation metric. Finding a way to monetarily recognize the contributions that diverse lawyers do provide. A lot of firms have no way to track the additional burdens or contributions that diverse attorneys provide. And recognizing that really all attorneys have a reason to be involved in this. And so, look, it is harder. You just have to work harder at the recruitment and retention of diverse lawyers. And so to actually accomplish the sort of metrics that we're all hoping for, you got to pay people, and you got to make sure that paying people for helping with that assists. So, once you reach a critical mass of diverse attorneys, it'll make all the difference in the world. So why don't I stop there? That's three pretty strong ones.
That's great. And is it okay if folks contact you if they want some more concrete examples?
Yeah, I got a whole list. So yeah, feel free.
Sounds like it. All right, we'll move on to our last speaker, Stephanie Green. Stephanie, I apologize. We're going to try to fit you into a bit of a shorter time frame than we originally anticipated.
Stephanie,
I
noticed it's 1:44 and we wanted to do Q&A. So yeah, we are running a bit late.
Yeah. So Stephanie is from the Executive Division of the CPUC, where she oversees the General Order 156 Utility Supplier Diversity Program. And she also has responsibility for the Government and Community Relations Group. And she came to the CPUC from the private sector, industries of telecom and technology. And prior to joining the CPUC, she was a product manager with AT&T, where she led a multidisciplinary team in preparing products for market. In addition, Stephanie worked as a strategy and policy consultant for KPMG, specializing in energy and communications infrastructure. Stephanie holds a MBA from Northwestern and a BA from Swarthmore. So Stephanie, what can you tell us about the CPUC's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force?
Absolutely. Well, to talk about diversity and inclusion in the CPUC, first I would say you have to look at what we do externally first, because our diversity and inclusion work began with the communities we serve, which is California, in particular the underserved and underrepresented communities. And so we have our environmental justice plan, which serves as our roadmap for how the Commission's decision-making should improve how it impacts California's environmentally vulnerable communities, which are often communities of color. We have our Disadvantaged Advisory Group, which reviews CEC and CPUC clean energy programs and policies to make sure that their impact on tribal and rural communities benefit, the clean energy policies benefit them and reduce pollution. And then we have our Low Income Oversight Board, who looks at low-income electric, gas, and water issues. And then we have our tribal communications and tribal consultation policy and land transfer policy. And all these are pretty recent. So I would say it starts with the fact in the last few years, the Commission has done quite a few things to look at diversity in terms of how we're approaching the California communities. So that's sort of external facing. And then now more recently, I will tell you candidly, our commissioners are pretty diverse. We have one white woman, one white male, one Hispanic woman, one Black woman, and one Asian woman. So at that level, it looks like the commission would be diverse. And previously to that, we had 2 white males, 2 African-American females, and 1 Hispanic female. And I think that created a sense of false security that the CPUC did have diversity and inclusion. But sadly, that actually wasn't necessarily the case. When you talk to the rank and file, looked at the agency and looked at our numbers within the commission, the higher up you go, the less representation you have among Blacks, Hispanics. Asians do a little bit better, but even them up at the highest levels. So typical to a lot of organizations, it's at the lower levels where you have better representation. And so I think with Prop 16 and the efforts to overturn Prop 209 with Black Lives Matter, it really seemed like a good time to look at the diversity and inclusion within the CPUC, to take an internal look. And to her credit, President Batcher did a couple different things. One, we did an extensive employee survey, because you have to start by asking your employees what's going on. How do they feel? How are they experiencing the workforce? Really get a feel for, is there an issue? And it was obviously something that very important and very top of mind to the employees, because we had about a 77% response rate on this survey. So obviously it was important to everybody, the employees at the commission. And so we used that to gauge the landscape. And candidly, I would think the perceptions among the employees may have differed than it was from the leaders, because the survey said that, and the staff were really honest and they were outspoken in the survey, and they said that the commission has work to do. That perhaps perceptions of diversity and inclusion, that there was work to be done, that people felt like they were experiencing bias. I will say the results have not been sort of released commission-wide, but I am on a working group, and as a part of that working group, I got a preview of the results. So not only did we do that survey, but we also now, every staff member at the commission has had to attend an implicit bias training course. In addition, all managers have to attend. Yes, I'm sorry, Shalani?
Oh, I was just saying you have 1 minute left, sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, I only started at 4:45.
Yeah,
so
this
I've only
question, sorry, this question.
Oh, okay. And so obviously we had the implicit bias training, and then the commission, not only for the staff, but every manager has to attend the implicit bias training. And then we have a diversity and inclusion task force, which is made up of members from across all divisions and in varying levels. It's a 16-member task force, and that work has just begun. So I'm happy to say, between the survey, between the training and the working group, that the diversity and inclusion work at the commission is off to a good start and well underway.
Thank you, Stephanie. So the commission has General Order 156, which sets voluntary targets for regulated entities to spend with diverse businesses, which now include minority, women, disabled veteran, and LGBT-owned businesses. So you've led this program for a number of years, and I was wondering if you could tell us in a few minutes about the major accomplishments of the Supplier Diversity Program.
Absolutely. So the Supplier Diversity Program really asked our utilities to utilize women, minority, disabled veteran, and LGBT firms. It's basically saying, you're in our communities, you should do business with companies from our communities. And the program has a goal of 15% minority, 5% women, and 1.5% disabled veteran. And it also encourages them to use diverse primes as well as subcontractors. The benefits of the program are increased competition, lower cost to ratepayers, job creation, opportunities for diverse suppliers, and economic recovery and innovation. Firms that utilize supplier diversity can see up to 10 to 15% benefit in terms of price on some of their contracts. There's 30 firms that participate, everybody from SDG&E, Southern California, PG&E, AT&T, Verizon, Cox, the water companies like Golden State Water, Suburban. So there's 30 firms that participate. The program is 32 years old. When it started back in '88, it was about $600,000 in spend and only 11% diversity. Today, it's $12.6 billion, so that's with a B, and over 33% diversity. And over 3,400 firms, diverse firms, got contracts last year to make up that number. The utilities have a strong training and development component where they do capacity building and training with diverse firms. Some of the training is even with executive programs like UCLA's Anderson School of Management. And I like to say that the program is dynamic. It continues to evolve with our society. Over time, we've added DVBE, LGBT. Who knows what we might add next? Maybe it'll be disabled. We've expanded to add the water industry. Now with SB 255, we've expanded to add community choice aggregators such as Marine Clean Energy, as well as electric service providers. And the program serves as a model nationwide. We are the gold standard. We were the first state to have a program like this. Other states like Maryland, Illinois, New York emulate us. Other agencies here within California, like the Department of Insurance, as well as the Office of Statewide Health and Planning, have emulated us. So I'm really proud of the fact that we are a best practice nationwide. We continue to serve as a lead economic initiative for the state. And one last thing I would say, I'm proud to say that every year, one of the things we specifically talk to the utilities about is their diverse legal spend. And we consider that an underutilized area, and we continually probe them on that. And the utilities do have to report to us annually, and then we report to the legislature. So it is highly visible, and we track it, we monitor, measure it, and we also do audits. So that's the Supplier Diversity Program, really helping to help diverse communities in California.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. $12.6 billion is an amazing achievement, and you should be incredibly proud of the work that you have done. That is mind-blowing. If it's all right with you, Stephanie, would it be all right if we skipped your last question and went on to Q&A from the other attendees?
Yeah, I had a feeling you might say that. That's fine. And sorry for speaking so fast, but I was trying to make up time since there's only 7 minutes left.
Yes, my apologies. I have not been the best timekeeper in this conversation, so I apologize, Stephanie. We did have one question, but I'm happy to take other questions if folks want to type them in real quickly. One question we had was, do the panelists have any advice for practitioners of color who feel they are not getting a fair shake within their organizations? Maybe we could have Dean Hahn and Sid respond to that as former or current law firm attorneys.
Hi, I'll start. I think first thing you need to do, am I on? I'm sorry. I want to make sure I'm okay.
Yes,
thank
you are.
Okay. So I think first thing you should do is seek out a mentor, whether it's inside your organization or outside. Many of us never got trained on how to negotiate our salaries, how to ask for promotions. There are many things that are not clear to people of color, that we weren't born into the setting that teaches us this stuff. So I think getting a mentor, having someone from the outside to coach you through it would be the first step that I would recommend. And I do this all the time for my students. I mean, I'm talking about our alum who graduated anywhere from 5 to 20, 30 years, and I still am coaching them on how to do that.
Yeah, so similarly to that, I would suggest making sure that your network is broader than your specific small section or group. And so looking for peer mentors and mentors, frankly, with a little bit of juice in the organization who might sit sort of adjacent to the group that you find yourself in. If you're finding that you have a difficult relationship with your direct superior, having someone who's potentially diverse and someone who can advocate on your behalf laterally is often the best way to have someone actually fight for you.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. So Stephanie, I'm wondering if we can go back to you for the last question I wanted to ask you, which is, what advice would you give to other women of color working in the energy industry on overcoming barriers?
Sure. Did I unmute again?
You are muted.
Okay. Well, I love this question because I think it's one that we can offer a lot of advice on. So, well, I would say, first of all, work for an organization that supports diversity and inclusion. That's the first thing. What does the leadership and the board look like? Have confidence in yourself when working in an industry dominated by men. Set personal goals and expectations. Surround yourself with experts, mentors, and advocates in the industry to develop new skill sets and get yourself a mentor and consider being a mentor to someone else. Take advantage of training and development programs, attend outreach and industry events, and keep abreast of how the industry is evolving. And I would say be visible, network. You can't succeed alone. Really does take a village. Join these industry trade groups that were mentioned earlier, such as the American Association of Blacks in Energy, Hispanics in Energy, and numerous other groups. Embrace constructive criticisms and challenge yourself to listen, learn, and engage. And as a leader, be an advocate for women and minorities, provide them with opportunities to develop and enhance. Myself, from my team is 40% Black, 40% white, 10% Asian, and 10% Hispanic, 55% women, 45% male. So I lead by example. And I would say be nimble, be ready to pivot and adapt. I think COVID has really shown that. And have fun, enjoy what you do and enjoy yourself. Be true to yourself, and family comes first.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm so glad you were able to share that with us. We have one last question, which I'll aim to Mark and Al. How can non-diverse attorneys be allies to people of color?
Sure. I have a couple of ideas. Learn to practice self-awareness. Be very aware of what you say, how you say things, how you interact at meetings. Be an active listener. Listen when people speak. Really listen. Don't just think about what I'm going to say next. Ask questions. And then give encouragement and make space. Step back a little. Don't feel like you have to be the first one to always answer a question, to always come up with an idea. If a person of color has an idea you like, support it. Don't repeat it and act like it was your idea. Those are just very short ones.
Oh man, I just laughed out loud really hard because that happens to me all the time. Thank you, Mark. Al, any closing thoughts for everyone?
Sure. I think Mark had it right at the beginning of his initial comments about an hour ago in regards to mentorship. I think it's key for leaders within an organization, to reach out to their diverse attorneys and to help mentor them. It's just critical to their long-term success. So, as a closing comment for this call, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to try to fill that void, that mentorship void.
A call to action. I really like that. So thank you everyone for joining today, especially our esteemed panelists. Thank you so much for your time and effort and insight and knowledge. And thank you to our 150 plus attendees. And we hope this is just the beginning of a number of conversations we host about these topics. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shalini, are you still there?